Gosh, David. Oh boy. Welcome to 2020, right?
Yeah.
This environment has obviously created some things on the tax front, right? Some implications there. And to boot, we have a new administration looming. Both of those are impactful to your world. So really, I want to give you the floor. I've listened to you a couple times and I learned something new every single time. Um, so I really want you to just kind of walk us through what's going on out there.
Great, thank you very much. Just so everyone knows, I'm in New Jersey. I'm not actually in England at the moment. Just in case anybody's. I've been working on my English accent. I'm from New Jersey originally. The accent is still taking a little time. Hopefully it's coming off okay at the moment. I have got a few slides. So I wouldn't be a tax accountant if I didn't have a few slides to share. And there is a reason behind that. It reminds me of what I need to say as well. Yeah, Alex, 2020, what a year. It all started so well. And then around sort of mid-March, with all the lockdown and the travel bans, etc., that just transformed really the way that mobility tax had to operate and what we were looking at and some of the issues that we were facing. So I'll spend a little bit of time going through that. Then talk about some things that Section 139, you might be aware of this. This might help some of your businesses and certainly around the disaster relief and some payments which may be tax-free. As you say, you'll touch on some of Biden's tax proposals, very much this stage information only. And then thinking more into 2021 can't come soon enough, in my opinion, but some things to walk away with. So, as I said at the start of the year, everything was very much status quo. I'm glad you didn't play them earlier and you stuck with AC/DC. That was a good choice. But we were very much looking forward to another good year. And then we really had to pivot, and we saw companies really, as a result of lockdown, look at different ways in which their workforce had to operate. And this presented a number of challenges. I'm sure you've all lived this for the last 8 or 9 months, so I'm not going to spend too long on this, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the trends and some of the actions that some of the companies we've been working with have really sort of focused on. And that is very much around, first of all, that sort of reaction phase of, well, where is everyone and what are they doing and are they safe and all those sorts of angles. So we spent a lot of time working with companies on that sort of data piece of basically working out where people were. Some were stranded, some had relocated to new, safer locations, whether that was domestically or internationally. And as a result of that, we then started to work with companies on the exciting world of tax, which I know everybody, that's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about your remote workers is tax. And it certainly should be if it isn't already. So we think about tax and payroll and social security, and then also the sort of other sort of issues that come with that, immigration, employment law, and corporate tax as well, the entity aspects of it. So we've been working with a lot of companies in that sort of remedial work, really sort of working out where they are, where their employees are, and what that means to them from a corporate perspective, and then overlaying that with various sort of COVID-19 reliefs, whether that's state-driven, federal-driven, or international. So very complex, and I would say there's not a cookie-cutter kind of answer. It really depends on a lot of the factors for those individuals. We also saw the rise of different working styles, and I think we've all had to cope with that, and that's created a number of challenges around policies and processes internally. We're seeing the rise of this sort of permanent remote worker, the temporary remote worker, someone who just goes and spends, I want to spend 3 months on a beach in Brazil, and I'll work from there instead, those sorts of things. And then even the permanent remote worker in multiple locations. So someone who's sort of hired and maybe traveling around, more that sort of virtual assignment, those sorts of things. Commuters, they still exist. And we're certainly seeing some companies sort of address that issue now that they're going back into the office. And then also this concept of working from anywhere, which is very much a new phrase that's sort of been born this year, very much technology driven. So we're seeing all these different types, and each one presents slightly different challenges and results. And that's why we're seeing very much a shift in the market around just sort of trying to put certain employees in certain buckets. So it makes it a little bit easier to understand what the challenges are and what needs to be done. Just very briefly, what we've been helping with and what companies have been really focused on is obviously resolving those issues. Some are taking the stance of, it's 2020, we're just going to let it go and not change too much. Others have gone right at the opposite end of the spectrum and are very much focused on, we're going to make sure we're absolutely watertight. Others are looking at more senior individuals, more, the sort of VIPs, those with more, sort of substantial jobs or important jobs within the business that may create issues by virtue of their role and responsibilities. So making sure they're right for payroll, particularly. I mentioned policy reviews. Those people going through policy reviews at the moment, this pop-up policy idea, which was very much focused on just sort of a temporary policy whilst we get through this sort of period of disaster. Looking at a process for claiming, for wanting the employees to actually engage employee-driven remote working. Do they have to opt in? What do they have to do to actually, seek approval? And ultimately, that's driving the policy around, is it anywhere? Is it truly work from anywhere? Or is it you can work from anywhere as long as it's in the state you're employed in, the country you're employed in? So again, lots of sort of focus points around that. Payroll issues, payrolls need to catch up. We know that there's some real challenges with payroll, just around the technology. People know the issues, but it's actually getting the technology to marry up to the actual scenarios. And then ultimately, almost looking towards next year, and when people file their tax and tax returns for 2020, what's that going to look like? There might be some nasty surprises. States are desperate for cash, so there may be some more audits coming through there. So that's some of the trends we've seen this year. I'll touch very briefly on the CARES Act, and I know there's another bill going through at the moment. We haven't quite got all the details for that, but there is presumably more provision for some sort of relief. So the $1,200 checks are effectively a loan against your 2020 tax return. So that might be, we've yet to see where that lands in terms of will it be clawed back or not. But very much the act was written in a, they're basically advancing you $1,200 so far this year. Within the IRC code, section 139, there is a provision for payments to qualify under disaster relief terms and provisions there, which ultimately means that employers can make certain payments to employees that cover necessary personal, family, living, and funeral expenses incurred as a result of a qualified disaster. So we are in a qualified disaster, and we're still in that. That was declared in March. So again, and I'll share these slides with you afterwards, Alex, so you can send around to the group. These are some of the examples that you might want to consider. We know a number of employers have made payments to employees within this space. There are some provisions, there's some tax code around it, so do get advice before looking at it. But again, it's an opportunity to give something back to employees if that's what you want to do as a business, and equally some of the expenses that maybe you've incurred as an employer, perhaps relocating individuals back to the US. Almost there, Alex. I'm conscious of you cutting me off. So just in terms of Biden's plans, again, the devil's in the detail. These are very much the headlines at this stage. His plans are very much focused on increasing federal tax revenues. And it's very much sort of looking at the wealthy and increasing tax rates for the wealthy, and really rolling back some of the provisions that were put in the 2017 Tax Act that is currently in place. So a return to the tax bracket of 39.6% for incomes over 400,000 for married, filing joint. We're still waiting to see what that would be for married, filing separate or single, and some of the other positions you can take. But there's very much a return to that top rate. He's also written a provision in around long-term capital gains for individuals that have income over $1 million being taxed at the ordinary income rate. So that is a change from the long-term rate currently, which is 20% plus the 3.8% for the investment tax as well. So you know, that is could be a substantial cost as well, just to bear in mind. And they're also looking at capping the amount of 401k contributions that can be taken as a relief, again, based on tax bracket, actually. So more on that to come, but they're the headlines. I would say, if anything at this stage, there might be some planning to do in the next 22 days. So again, if think about, perhaps accelerating some payments or deductions into this tax year, just to take benefit of a higher tax rate next year. So things to think about there. So with my crystal ball, looking forward to 2021, we really do hope, as Karen was saying, that there's a opening up of movement of the workforce and people generally, just to help us in this sort of business. I think businesses will continue to embrace that remote working and working from anywhere. I think we'll see a return to some sort of normality. Business travel will come back. But I think that mix of employment options for the workforce will diversify. And that will present its own challenges internally for businesses. It goes without saying, I know this has been mentioned many years, and for many years, data, access to data, tracking of employees, and connecting different parts of the business through travel data, expenses, and all those sorts of things will become more important, I think, to make sure the company is compliant from a tax and payroll perspective. And right now, I think there's two things to do. First of all, it's year end, and I know you're probably all going through that. So again, think about, are there any things we can be doing right now, just before year end, to get in place around payroll? And then equally, with an eye to next year, what's the future state? What can you do to put in place? And you're wagging my finger at me.